Okay. Mutama Rico is saying, ask Dr. Davji why the government has not changed the terms of health care workers who are employed on contract to permanent and pensionable, despite them working in hard conditions when they were employed during the COVID pandemic. So those that were taken up during the COVID pandemic on contract and some were interns, are they being absorbed?
I want to answer that as I answer what Kitty asked earlier. That we have had difficult economic conditions with COVID and everything else. That why then are we having this thing done now? If you look really as a country, we talk about new government now. We talk about the government previously. But the commitment as a country that we have to sort out and to be at a good debt records with IMF and with the Chinas and with all the Western countries is very clear. So it is very important that that commitment to be the good books to get more loans with these particular bodies should be given to the healthcare. That means they should be given to the commitments to implement the CBAs. Because if these loans are taken, the people who benefit, quote unquote, for the services like roads and everything must be healthy. And therefore, if the healthcare is affected in that process, then there's no value to all of them. So that commitment needs to be translated. On this thing of contract, the Public Service Commission guidelines is very clear on how healthcare workers and workers need to be employed. And it's specific that all the workers need to be employed on permanent and pensionable terms.
Yep.
But there's some contravention that the government sometimes undertake. For example, for the case of these healthcare workers that they put on contracts, they do this as a punitive action. And there's a judgment that was very clear recently that any worker should not be employed on discriminatory terms as for those others who do the same job. Everybody, if you are doctors in the same hospital, somebody should not be employed on contract with others
when others are permanent.
Because when you are on contract, you cannot have, you are not sure your career progression. When you are on contract, you are not sure, you cannot get health cover. When you are on contract, you don't have any pensions that are there. So it's actually also a discriminatory aspect, which is also contravenes the Constitution. That's why that judgment came out. And we are out as a union to ensure that every employee, every worker within the health sector, the doctors and the team actually employed in the right terms. Yes, and that was also part of our notice for the intended strike action, because then that gives the retention, that makes somebody has peace that I can go
knowing that now I have a job,
train more further even to come and offer the services.
When you talk about the 2017 collective bargaining agreement, which was signed by the union and the union leadership then in 2017, and the governors who were in office then, plus the CS for Health then. Am I right?
Yes.
All the 47 governors then signed.
Yes.
And the Cabinet Secretary for Health then signed.
Yes.
And the then Cabinet Secretary for Health was Dr. Mailu, was it?
Dr. Mailu, yes.
Yeah. So, implementation of this is the reason why you're threatening to go on strike.
Yes.
So, the new cohort of governors that came in after 2018, which of them implemented this? Is there any county that you can say made some progress towards the implementation, or are you just saying blanket there was less than 50% implementation, so we go on strike, or are you acknowledging those that made an effort?
In terms of the implementation of the CBA, there's a component that I would say there's nil implementation. Actually, that was a judgment of the court. That's the Article A of this particular CBA. There was a nil implementation in 47 counties.
Nil implementation.
Nil implementation. That means that part of the salaries was nil.
Salaries, nobody implemented a pay rise.
In the whole country for that particular part. Then the aspect of the employment of the doctors, we can say in the whole country is about 5%.
Wow.
As a country, that's what we see in that prospect. Then on the part of the promotions, we have, I'll call as the highest level of frustrations among the doctors, even the consultants, within the whole country. But then I will give credit to Nakuru County, because at least there's a big number of doctors that are promoted in that county. Also give credit to Nairobi Metropolitan Services, because in the 2020 September they also did a big part of it, and also Kericho, and also a good credit to Makueni County. Those actually did something on that particular part
on promotion,
on the promotion aspects. But then the other counties, it's still a journey for them. Then when you look at the issues of the medical cover, well, I would say the county that has actually left most of the workers within that county, not even wanting to work there, is Bomet County, where we have tried to discuss this with like 3 previous governors to have it implemented. So it's been an issue. And even it was one of the biggest riding things in the meeting yesterday. Yes. And also the aspect that when county governments have not remitted the statutory deductions to NHIF, and therefore
your NHIF is also not active.
Not active. So you go to the hospitals, the deductions have been done, but you can't get the care. That has been a very common phenomenon to almost 21 counties in the country.
I mean, I know that we've posed this question before, but then in light of what is currently happening, with waiting for these 60 days to now get governors as well as the ministry to kind of get their ducks in a row. In this matter, specifically, how would a commission help? And I'm going to do a comparison, if you'll allow me, to the Teachers Service Commission. Going into the end of the year, it was clear that actually probably before that, it was clear that they were going to need more teachers coming into 2023 with the split that we see in the curriculum, right? The commission handles all of that. It's not a question of schools in this particular area, maybe we don't have... They handle that. The conversation they're having between commission and ministry is very clear. We need teachers, we are going to hire. We deal with our other issues. Of course, they're having their own issues. We know that. But do you see a commission then being instrumental in sorting out some of these issues that you're currently facing?
Absolutely. When you look into the Police Service Commission, when you look at the Teacher Service Commission, or even the Armed Forces, and when you look at the budget, when the budget cycle comes, there's a particular budget that is put for that, for these functions. There's a budget for human resource aspect and for everything that pertains to it. And therefore, this commission can actually plan and see how many schools we have in the country and the distributions of these particular teachers per that particular year. But on the flip side, when you have the counties and the way the money goes into the counties, it goes as a blanket. It goes totally together. So it's the prerogative of the counties then to start budgeting how much goes for healthcare, how much goes for workers, how much goes for promotion and for all these things. So most of the times, all the activities within the county will override each other. And many counties will not then look at the human resource aspect as a component that need to be given priority. And that's why we say if we need to have the service provision adequately as per the WHO even pillars, then we need to handle the health workers differently. And we need to have a budget that is put in place to ensure that there's employment. If you look at the last 5 years, our population has been increasing. But the report from Council of Governors, for example, for the year 2021-2022, which was released last year, July, it indicated that in that 1 year period, that only employed 700 healthcare workers, and in that 700 healthcare workers, if it is aggregated downwards, you realize that about 70 doctors in the whole country, or at most 100 doctors in the whole country, particularly almost 200-300 nurses. So that number is actually very low for that year. But then, if that was to be done by commission, we will talk about a figure of about 50,000 healthcare workers, because then that will truncate down to almost all the sub-cadres within the health sector, and that certainly will improve the service provision.
What will it take then to have that conversation escalate to that level? Must we have a constitutional amendment to have a health services commission?
I must give credit to the current group of governors that we have, because they seem to be more progressive in the ideas of healthcare. And this happens because they came in with a lot of promises to change healthcare, and probably that's why they dislodged the opponents and dislodged the previous governors. Because the governors that were there previously had they didn't want to hear anything regarding the Health Service Commission. And in fact, even when it was in that project for BBI, they are the ones who made sure that it was not part of the discussions. But now time has come where by the governors who came in are realizing that this aspect of human resources is a burden also to them, because it needs money, it needs a budgeting, which they can't get.
And they have to keep dealing with strikes all the time.
Yes. And again, this government, the Kenya Kwanza, in their manifesto, they indicated they're going to be mediators between the healthcare workers and the county governments to ensure that we have that particular aspect of Health Service Commission, because this will help even in the training. The other thing that we discussed with the Council of Governors that is very important and need to be looked into strongly is the doctors and postgraduate studies. You see, a county releases, we have about 1,200 doctors across the country who are doing the postgraduate. And see, when you're doing a postgraduate, you are actually offering the special services in Kenyatta or in MTRH. So you are not really in the class.
So you're in any of the two referral hospitals.
Yes, either Maseno or KUTRH or KNH or MTRH, you're actually working. So in this process, the counties that pays you then are overburdened by the number of the personnel that they can employ. That increases the shortage within the counties. So there's absolute need, and this was discussed last year and the previous year, that the county revenue, the CARA, need to actually allocate per head for those counties the number of doctors that are in postgraduate to employ more doctors.
So to absorb doctors,
Yes.
so they can cover for the ones that are
Training.
in postgraduate. So the other question I wanted to ask is, since 2017, in the 2018-2019 financial year, 2020-2021 financial year, 22-20, has there been an allocation, a budgetary allocation towards implementation of the CBA? Like saying, so in the last financial year, Mr. Speaker, X amount of money had gone into the services. We have to increase because we are acknowledge that we have a CBA in place. That's why we are allocating more money, appropriating more money towards this.
I believe that from the onset of the CBA in 2017, there has been budget allocation for its implementation because it went through all the channels. It went through the Treasury before it was signed. It went to all these particular departments. It's just, as I say, somebody who has not really done his job to ensure that it is implemented. And that's why there's a lot of frustration. And that's why we've written letters to it to have it implemented. And we actually went to court of it to follow it. The court process is not very quick. It's actually a lethargic process. It took about 11 months to actually get the judgment. So that is a clear indication that the funds for it are there. It's just that the mechanisms to make it be released are that what probably has been lacking.
But is it really there, Dr. Like if you went to the records of the county government, pick any county government, all right? Look at the point when the CEC for Finance went to the county assembly with the budget proposal and said, this is what we'd like to spend in the next financial year. Was there a request to appropriate more money to health sector? And the justification of it being that we are going to, this one is going to increase the salaries and allowances because we have a CBA in place. We want to hire more doctors, and these are the number of doctors we want to hire. We want to implement a medical cover for the doctors, and the county assembly okayed that for them to implement. Was that actually there in the county?
See, that will be variant for every particular specific counties in the sense how they put it up. And that's why we have a number of counties that have implemented these other aspects of like the medical cover, those that have actually looked into the aspect of promotions, because then they put it as a priority. At the onset of the CBA, on that part of Article A of it and the part of allowances, that was in the budget. It is just that the configuration of this payment system was not done, and that made it not to be put into the place for the basic salaries. And I believe that was what caused the delays. That's why I say there's some people who have to do their job for this thing to work. And number two, because there was no any way it would be signed and start getting implemented, because we signed it in July and the implementation started in November.
Yeah.
So there's no way they will implement part of it and ignore part of it. I believe it was somehow deliberate. And that's why we've been on the way to try to push it to be done. On this aspect of employment and making and getting more workers or more doctors to work in the counties, it just goes hand in hand with the aspect of the drugs and the aspect of the equipment. As much as the counties know these things are necessary, they're absolutely needed to be there. If they don't prioritize it at that time and say we want to construct this particular hospital for the public to see that we are working, we want to have these, because there have been a lot of, I will say, elephant projects within the county, white elephant projects everywhere of hospitals that have been built, but there's no functions in them. So as you do that, you know very well that you just need a hospital. You need them to have labs, you need them to have workers, you need them to have the drugs.
Yeah.
So if that is not budgeted for, but the constructions is budgeted for, then that's what gives us the gap that we see.
The gaps.
Yes.
You know, I'm actually driving towards putting the union in the rightful position in this particular conversation.
Yes.
In terms of, you've signed a CBA.
Yes.
Now, the Secretariat of the Union, which is you and your others who work with you, have the job of making sure that this CBA is being implemented in the annual development plans every year in the budgets.
Yes.
Now, do you sit in the budget making conversations? Do you look at the budget proposals at the point when budgets are being made by the specific each individual county to make sure that you have ensured your component of the CBA has been input there? Because if it's not, you will come back 5 years later and you'll be saying, this CBA was not implemented, and you will not be able to track at what point it wasn't implemented. Yet maybe you'd have had an opportunity to push for its implementation if you participated in the budget making process.
We don't necessarily participate on the nitty-gritties of budget making processes, but there's the component of the public participation that happens in all the counties, and the national one always happens at the KICC. In the preceding years, we have been giving our proposals, including the aspect of the human resource, the drugs, the components of the CBAs in total. We've been giving that to all these particular counties and even to the national in the public participation, because our union is divided to the point that even at the county levels we have the county liaisons and regional reps who will present these. But you see, even the way the law has it in the public participation, you just present these, but then the prerogative of the committee or the task force that is doing it, they decide what then goes down in the final document.
That's true, Dr.
Yes.
But you have a legally registered CBA.
Yes.
Now, as KMPDU, I'm speaking now on behalf of the members of KMPDU.
Yes.
You, the CEO, and the Secretariat of KMPDU have the mandate to ensure that this is implemented.
Yes.
And if a budget has been passed by the Nairobi County Assembly, and the CEC for Finance, Charles Kerich, went to the Nairobi County Assembly, and KMPDU was not aware whether this aspects of implementation of the CBA have been incorporated in this, then you're dropping the ball on behalf of your members.
Now,
you ought to be the one who's raising the red flag and saying to the county assembly, to the chair of the health committee in the county assembly, or the chair of budget, or chair of finance in the county assembly, please do not pass this budget because it does not have this component, which should be there.
If you get down to the counties, on the county governments that you've seen, we all talk about the main industrial actions that have been seen in the scenario. Some of the results that were causing this, and when we do over all these notices, we actually copy the health committee in the county assemblies and the courts and all the departments, and we bring out that we are given proposals for these things to be included. But then they will say that these matters will be in the supplementary budgets. So it's up to the point that the workers within the counties, even nationally, goes to withholding the services, that this discussion becomes more serious. And
are you saying, Dr. that there is nothing you can do to make sure that your CBA is implemented?
And that's why they have things to do.
Apart from calling for a strike?
If you look at our framework that we put in place, we have got a judgment from the court that is there out to be obeyed. And you see, by the time that we are going successful in industrial action, there is an absolute contempt of this court order. And by the time we are going to court to get the court orders, we have done all the proposals, we have put our participations even in all these forums. So then the only bargaining chip that is actually recognized worldwide, ILO Convention 87 and 98, and even in our constitution, that by the time that the employer or the government do not listen to all these other mechanisms, the last resort then is to withhold that sacred services that you have to give. Because then that now makes them see that all these other approaches that you have put in place have not been honored.
Essentially, you're saying that everything that needed to be done has been done.
Yes.
Every process that needed to be followed has been followed. Yes. And by the time you're going to court, that was yet part of these processes. And the court pronounced itself on this matter. And despite that, you are still giving the government 60 days.
Yes.
I hear that, and I agree. I'm just saying that there's something else that still the Secretariat of KMPDU can do.
What were you suggesting?
That right now we are talking about the 2023-2024 budget.
Yes.
At this point, have you had a sit down with the CEC for Health in Nairobi, the CEC Finance in Nairobi, and told them? Have you had a sit down with the chair of the Health Committee in the County Assembly of Nairobi, the chair of Budget and Committee of the County Assembly of Nairobi, and told them, flag, look out for this. We will be looking out for it. If this is not included in the plan for the budget, we raise the red flag at that point, and we tell the people, do not support the approval of this budget. If that budget is not passed, it will be because KMPDU said our CBA has not been included in this.
So
it's basically it's giving you more work, but it's the work that the Secretariat of KMPDU should be doing anyway.
If you look at our part of our agreement, we agree that every county has to constitute their CBA implementation matrix to be chaired by the governors.
Yes.
And the members of that particular committee are the CEC Finance, the Chief Officer Finance, CEC Health, Chief Officer Health, Accountable Service Board, and the Human Resource component of it. So they are to get down and see why have they not been able to implement this, and then report to the full council, I think, the month of February.
Yes.
So we have put that initiative to see that these particular...
Have they done that? Did they do that? Did they draw up the implementation matrices?
Yes, we actually
have counties.
And yes, we have that
for per county.
Per county,
okay.
To all the counties.
And the budget component, the cost component per year each.
For this implementation.
Okay. Yes. So it makes the work even easier.
So you see, it was
part
at
the point of budget. At the point of budget, then you can just be going to look, we need X amount of money extra in this financial year's budget. If it's not there, you just flag it and say, according to the law, what has been registered, which is legal, this is not there, so this budget is illegal.
So then actually they have to budget for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Because we see on the flip side, we saw the case of like Kipia situation where we had an industrial action for a period and the former government actually dismissed the doctors. There was a court order that reinstated these doctors with arrears for their salaries from the point of termination. But then when this new government came into office, because this is the government for hope, not only for the doctors, but even for the people of Laikipia, the first thing, even before we were sworn in, is to look at what is the implication of having all these consultants back to serve the people of Laikipia. And the budget was about 300 million. And we sat down as a union, okay, fine, what can the county afford and what can the doctors give away? To the point that by the time doctors were saying, fine, we can give this kind of 100 million for this and say pay arrears of 170 million, county say they comfortably can sort this out. And in that essence, if you look, that county, the service delivery has changed. Because the consultants are back, the doctors are back, and services are being offered.
So you have more health workers.
There are more health workers.
Good. Let's take a break. 27 minutes to 10. We want to hear from you now. 0719 012 600. Do you think doctors are justified to actually go on strike this time? The government has not implemented the 2017 collective bargaining agreement. They went on strike in 2016. That's a famous strike that went over 100 days. And they signed a CBA with the government. And Dr. Atellah, who is the Secretary General of KMPDU, is telling us, in terms of, for example, salaries and allowances, there has been zero implementation. Just small time implementation of other aspects of this CBA in terms of, for example, absorption of doctors who are interns, in terms of talking about medical cover for them and others. The CBA basically has not been implemented by any of the 47 counties countrywide. And doctors were saying, we are going on strike to enforce the implementation of this. Should they? Should they not?
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Should doctors go on strike? So they have given the government has said, give us this 60 days to look at what we can implement, and then we'll give you a response. The likelihood is that they are not going to implement the CBA in this financial year. That's the reality, all right? Budgets have been passed. We only have 5 months to the end of the financial year, so likelihood of this CBA not being implemented, highly likely. When does the CBA expire? It's a 5-year CBA, right?
It's a 4-year.
It's a 4-year CBA. So you are now supposed to be actually having a conversation about the new CBA.
No, Eric, when you said that, Daktari's face dropped.
Which one?
Well, yes, because if you do the
So
math,
now, if you do the math, and we're saying that budget cycle, not possible, things have already been written. Now here we are saying governors and ministry gave you 2 months, knowing full well that there's really nothing that they're going to be able to
They'll
change.
be coming back to you on the 5th of March. They'll tell you we
And they'll
have
tell you,
2 months
look,
to the end of the
budget cycle is coming to an end. As we speak, we're talking about budget for next year. So anything that we're going to talk about now is budget for next year.
Yeah.
Abi?
Essentially, you're saying they're buying time.
So what does that mean? How does that look? Because if we're being practical here and looking at the numbers, these fellas told you yesterday. It's not yesterday. Maybe Tuesday. Yesterday. Thursday. Day before yesterday, Wednesday. They said, give us 2 months, let's organize. Knowing full well that anything money, they will not be able to alter anything in this cycle. Say for an act of God, really. Knowing full well. But you still went ahead and said, okay, let's give you 2 months. Knowing that reality.
You see, the question I would ask is,
doing anything is very slim. Why would you go ahead and accept this promissory note and say, all right, let's give you 2 months when you know?
But even if you go on strike,
whether you damned if you do, damned if you don't. You go on strike, don't go on strike. You're still going to get shafted, as from what I see. So what does it really look like? Is it something that can be waited for? You know? And this is the reality.
I was in the previous government were not able to ensure that they fulfill the mandate of the CBA.
We're not willing.
Today's Friday. One has to be a little polite. We're not able to. Okay? What is it about this new government that makes you think that they are different from the other government? And what is it that you think that makes it possible, even with the 60-day moratorium you've given them, that given that space of time, they will be able to come back with something that your members can actually accept and consider? This is at least some way forward, because the full implementation, as Eric put it correctly, that is not going to happen. That one simply won't. But what would be the acceptable minimum for
things that can be done? Before you respond to that, let's hear from Geoffrey, who's calling in from Mombasa. Good morning, Geoffrey.
Good morning, SpiceFM. How are you?
Very well,
Fine,
thank
thanks.
you.
Well, I have a straight question to Dr. Atellah.
Ask him.
Just to find out, Mr. Dr. Atellah,
Yes.
how are you?
Very fine, thank you.
Well, my question is, do you have ethics when you sign for medical services?
What do you mean?
I want to know regarding medication or medical services is a very essential service that should not be put to a halt. And the moment you are on strike and people's lives are lost, how do you compensate to that after maybe your strike has been considered and whatever you're agitating for has been considered?
Hippocratic oath.
Yes.
You have it. Does it apply in Kenya?
It actually applies worldwide. And if you look at in our suspension of the strike yesterday, what we really considered strongly was the Kenyans. And we thought as a union that it's not important and it's not vital, it's not necessary to take Kenyans through the pain that they experienced through the 100 days of doctor strike. But we have to be alive that the doctors that need to offer these services in the hospitals are human beings.
Are also Kenyans.
And they need to pay their bills. If a doctor has not been paid for 2 months or 3 months, and you expect the person to go to the hospital and treat a patient, he's also a patient.
And actually, if that doctor falls sick and they don't have medical cover, they become that
the patient. They become that Kenyan that can access the healthcare. So those are facts that need to be looked at. When you have an agreement that you'll be paid, have an agreement to be paid over this time and it's not honored, as an individual, even if you don't go on this, if you go on the strike, it is now the person who signed this who actually has a right to give you this health care that has denied these services. You asked me about the 60 days moratorium that we've given to the government. If government says that this is essential service, as my brother has put it clearly, and in 60 days is essential service that you consider to be critical, nothing is being done, and then the workers then uphold this particular service that they need to offer, then it is the government on strike. It is now our brother need to put the government to account that why do you sign this document when you know very well it's an essential service and then that you go against it when those workers actually can go on strike. When you look at the right to strike as per the Constitution and the right to life, and also when with the ILO Convention, it brings it out that by the time you are going on strike, as much as we put it closely, you have tried all the possible avenues. If it were that our leaders were also seeking healthcare in these government public hospitals, if it were that the MCAs, the MPs, the governors were seeking healthcare there and sending their families there, then there will be much more change, because then their interest will be there. But we have a scenario whereby all these parties go for big FT private covers that take them to private bigger hospitals that not subject them to this particular scenario. So I want to tell my colleague or my friend there that on this process, we are actually helping him and the family, that if they go to the hospitals, they get doctors, they get the drugs, they get the lab services, and that the mental torture that doctors will have when they want to treat you and they can't have the paraphernalia for the services is cured.
You know, there's a conversation that is sometimes lost, and actually you've brought it into focus, and that is the working conditions.
Yes.
You see, the Hippocratic Oath about lives is not about the doctor reporting to work, but the doctor being also enabled to do what it is that they're trained to do. Now, part of the problem that arises is that they're not able to do what they're trained to do. So yes, you are there working, you would like to do what you're supposed to, but you can't. Salary aside, you simply can't. And in many cases, the argument is that this is the real problem. How are you going to be a health worker when you actually can't work? So, in essence, when you think of what you're calling a strike, this industrial action, when the government meets its end of the bargain, the citizenry benefit.
Yes.
But the argument has been the doctors benefit. Yes, they do benefit, but the citizenry benefits. Because the things that make health care workable and beneficial to the citizenry is then achieved.
You know what I fail to connect is the fact that among the most visible devolved functions is health, right? So there's health, there's agriculture, but health now is most visible because people come to a single place called a health facility to access a service, and they know that this service is being offered by my county government. It's very clear. The single largest budget item in most of the counties is still health. And yet, we have all these issues. We have a CBA that lasts 5 years and has not been implemented. We have issues with commodities in medical facilities that have a huge bill with the National Supplies Agency. We have doctors who have not been hired. They have been trained. They are out there. They haven't been hired. Where's the disconnect? When a governor is campaigning, one of the things that they'll talk about is health, because they know that that's the one direct mandate that I have that I can use to entice the people to vote for me, and yet they don't implement it. Why? Is it that the people don't apply sufficient pressure to the governors? What is it?
I think a time has come that we need to put the governors and the leaders into account for the promised the public. But this part that you say that the health is the biggest budget within the counties, and then it's not really working. You see, we have a budget of, let's say, 100% in the whole country.
Yes.
But then only 15% of this budget goes to the counties. And then 50% or 6% of it, that now goes to all the healthcare and all that. So it then means there's a problem from the top. There's a problem from the budget that goes down. And that's why we have been advocating that why should the governors subject themselves to this torture and frustration, and then just relieve this particular part of healthcare to be managed and funded by the national government from this 85%. Because ideally, the percentage of healthcare that we talk about, of 4.4%, goes to the Ministry of Health. Every year, and that's what should be there for capacity building and for training. And if you look at this project that we call the MES project, that was almost given to almost 219 hospitals.
Yes.
The machines that were there, they were run down by rust and everything. They were not functional. And the main thing is there were no personnel to operate the machine. So it was I think, misuse of the public funds in that process. But if there is a concerted, harmonized process between the national government and the county to see that the machine that you're giving us, it follows with the personnel, it follows with the process. So then that will bring a change. So therefore, ideally, the county governors must also come alive to see what can work, what cannot work, openly and objectively, and then this can bring the conversation to bring a change to it. But when you insist that it is working and everybody in the hospital, we have enough doctors when it's not there, then that becomes a problem.
I think there's an unspoken system of behavior and expectance of whomever, because we talked about, you said it's been there since 1963. But
Yes.
we're not talking about anything new. We're only talking about new sheriffs coming into town, isn't it?
Yes.
So there's this unspoken expectance that they will come, make a promise. Everybody will say, okay, we'll come back. Then they know, these guys will make a little bit of noise, but then we'll come back and make a promise, and then we can hang on to the tails of that promise for the next 4.5 years. Before they know it, we're gone. Somebody else comes in. What am I saying? I think that, and shoot me if you must, but I think that the insistence on this position waxes weak at some point. That in as much as we see there is no goodwill to implement this thing, because look, if you don't have a healthy nation, and I always say, the nation at its weakest shows the vulnerability of the nation. Yeah, people are sick, the nation is sick. Yeah, people are hungry, the nation is hungry. And that's what we're talking about. But the seriousness with which we take it, that somebody can make a promise that as clear as the sun is shining, we know that in 2 months it is not going to happen. But we still take it and say, okay, let's see what they're going to do in 2 months. You know very well. They know that you know. You've just said it's new sheriffs in town in the same system. They know that nothing is going to come of this in 60 days. But because they know they can drag it along sometime, same system. It's the same thing that people have been doing. The same question that CT was asking. What's the difference now with the people who were there before and the ones who've come in? They already know that
some of them are the same.
Exactly. The habitual behavior is that they'll come and make a promise on a Wednesday afternoon, and then Wednesday afternoon, 2 months down the line, they'll come and tell you, well, yeah, So in as much as we're saying they don't have the goodwill, on the other side as well, the insistence to make sure that there is excellence at that level is not strong enough, in my opinion.
Dr. How do you get our lawmakers to support your cause? Because the very people that you are fighting to ensure have a healthy health system are the people we elect to represent us, whether it's at the county assembly or at the national assembly. Let me ask the question again. How do you get these people to understand this? Because these are the people who vote for them.
Yes.
How do you get them to support the cause? Because they're the ones who make these laws. They're the ones who actually have the mandate and the power to bring to force the very things that you're talking about. If it's a question of tweaking the law so that the national government, Afia House, does more than what they're doing, or the services are at their doorstep, these are the people who can do it. You have a committee of health and parliament, and many of the people in that committee are medical doctors. It's not as though this is something they don't understand. They do. But my question again, even at the level of Senate, at the level of the Council of Governors, how do you get them to support this? Because if they support it, then the national government won't have a choice. But so long as it is KMPDU, have I got it right?
Yes.
Who are fighting this thing? You're a non-entity. They'll say these ones, okay. As Ndu put it, you'll be strung along.
There's one aspect there that is a reality, and I think there's no any other better time that it came into fore than these previous days, where the information is coming down to the public to know why a patient who lives central and goes to KU cannot be admitted because they don't have funds, and therefore they have to rush to Kenyatta Hospital and they die on the way. We have cases of about 6 mothers who died in Kakamega because they could not get the most basic emergency drugs in the facilities to have them to get the services to manage it. We have situations like the Master Travis, who, if those hospitals were working, as much as the case was very severe, the intervention was much earlier, but then they have to rise to Kenyatta. These were just a few of the epitome of the cases that exist. But then that is the scenario in the whole country, if these things can come to fore. And I like the fact that the Senate was investigating this matter, and they have investigated previous matters.
Don't hold your breath. But the Senate is investigating. Don't hold your breath.
But that's what you were asking. How can you get them to...
Yes.
Don't you think it works? At least it's a step in the right direction.
Rather, it's politicized, but then they were discussing the matter, and then they were seeing the scenarios. You get the point. And then one thing that we kept asking them while this was being discussed, you realize Mama Lucy Hospital has been working for all these years without any government funds on it. It's running, it's like a car that has been bought with no fuel.
How then does it run, Dr.?
It has been only running with the FIA funds, with the money within it. So there's no, and that's why if you go to Mama Lucy until this point, you'll find as much as it has over 200 beds, you'll realize that the admission has or double the number.
That's close to 500 people.
Close to 500 plus patients. So that's why this government, I think the new one, if based on these reports and based on the scenarios, there must literally be a deliberate aspect to change it. And these are things that are happening in all the places. While the people that are investigating, like the Senate and the likes, do not really get services in these facilities.
Yeah.
So you see, until the public and everybody gets empowered to understand that it's our right as per Article 43 to access healthcare. And if I go to the hospital and I don't see a doctor, I have a right to question. If I go to the hospital, I've been told to buy the drugs outside, then I should ask, where is the taxpayer's money?
Yeah.
If I go to the hospital, there is no lab functional, I should not keep quiet because these same individuals will come to ask for the votes. So as long as that happens, and as long as there's a public understanding of these issues, then the members of parliament, the MCAs, then will come to see the value of it. Because within those particular counties, if something happens to an MCA's relatives, they call directly the medical superintendent.
Oh, yes.
They call the chief officers. They want ambulances to be released. But then it should be the same for those who do not have a
For
relation to the
everybody
MCAs.
who needs that.
Yes. And so once that understanding is in the fore with every person, then there will be the need to actually invest and change the healthcare.
You know, I know I sound a little negative. I sound negative because I am negative. You see, the issue of that is behind the question I asked, how do you get these bodies to be interested, is from the understanding that very many of the groupings of individuals who comprise this, what we call our elected leadership, their actions get me to understand that they believe that solving a problem involves talking about it.
Yes.
Solving a problem involves having a committee that looks into it,
Produce a
investigates, come with a
report.
report. That's it. And that doesn't do a thing.
Yes. It's politicizing.
Apart from having meetings where perhaps a little allowance is paid and you talk about it and you gather information. Now, the benefit may be if they actually do what they say they're going to do, there will be a report that one can actually act on if one wishes to act on. But we have so many of these reports.
Yes.
We're not discussing something that we don't know about. We're not talking about something that is fresh, new, something we've never encountered. We've encountered these things from antiquity, from time immemorial. So, again, the question has to be asked, what do we need to do so that these people who are elected to ensure that the very things that we're talking about are actually effected? How do we get them to actually understand this dire need? How do we get them to understand? Because it is evident they don't. They talk about understanding it, and that's just about the sum total of what they do. They talk about it.
I think it's got to come down to public pressure.
Absolutely.
What Dr. you're saying, as long as we start now connecting, I go to a public facility, I should get the services. I should find a medical officer here, I should find a healthcare worker, I should find a lab. If this facility ought to have a lab, I should find. If we start saying, no, I need to find these things here, then the pressure goes into the governor's office and he knows, okay, I can't just be saying this is devolved and it's not working.
It's not working.
It's got to work. And why is it not working is because of this, and the other.
Eric, you know how very right you are. You are so right. You are so very right. Because the current government the government we have now understood this principle. And the entire campaign was based on the people.
Yes. So people driven.
Yes, they understood this perfectly, which also means that when there is a pushback from these same people,
they're going to sit up and do something about it.
They will listen.
Absolutely.
Yes, listen. Dr. Harry, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And let's keep talking. When you get updates from those stakeholders, let us know. Let's discuss them. Let's enlighten the people so that we all walk the journey together.
Yes. And people should know that the health is their right.
Indeed.
Yes.
Completely. Dr. Davji Atellah is the Secretary General of the Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union. We've been talking about the plight of healthcare workers and the healthcare system in the country. The planned strike by doctors has been suspended for 60 days until we hear what the government comes up with, and then we'll hear from the doctors after that. Thank you for tuning in to Kenya's biggest conversation today and the entire of this week. We'll be back next week on Monday from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday.